Hello, beautiful friends. I'm Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you deepen in your connection with the angels and divine love as you rest, relax, and hopefully fall asleep. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. You can find out more about me at illuminatingsouls.com, where you can read more about the one-on-one angel sessions that I offer, as well as soul mentoring and a variety of classes. I want to begin by thanking you for being here with me right now. You have a lot of content to choose from, and that you have made space to tune into this podcast in this moment of time is truly a blessing. So thank you for being here. And if you're finding this podcast helpful, I have a small request, and that is if you will write a review or leave a rating on your podcast app. That would be wonderful. It really helps in getting the word out so that this podcast can be made available to even more people. So again, thank you so much for listening and for being here. As we begin our time together, I want you to know that the love of the angels is already here for you. This podcast is infused with light for you. And the way each episode flows is we talk for a little bit. Actually, I talk and you listen. Maybe you have a dialogue inside of your own consciousness as we embark upon conversation. And that just usually takes a few minutes. And then I call in the angels to be with you. And the angelic energy is such that it is highly compatible with sleeping. Often when we come into these higher frequencies, there is a natural instinct to relax and let go into it. So you'll get to drift off to sleep, knowing that you are surrounded by love. And then I'll read to you a bedtime story. And tonight I'm going to be reading to you the second installment of Edith Nesbitt's book, The Amulet. So I invite you to cozy on in and take some nice deep breaths in and out as we settle in together. So what I wanted to share with you about is a deep sense of fatigue that so many of us are feeling. Now, if you're not feeling it, please don't take it on. Don't feel as if it is an invitation to surrender into an experience you're not really having. But for many of us who are empaths, who feel life through our hearts, we are well into an ongoing experience. And it's taking a lot just to show up every day. I share this with you so that you will generate more compassion, love, and understanding for your own experience of where you are right now. If you don't have the energy for big dreams and big adventures, if it's all you can do just to show up and shower in the morning and feed yourself and your family and do what has to get done, it's okay. for some reason, we don't give ourselves permission to feel as deeply as we feel. And one of the ways the angels talk about this time that we're in is we're using a lot of our energy simply to maintain balance. And we have been moving through a years-long time of stress. And so we're feeling it. If you listen to the last episode, I was talking about choosing the path of ease. And this is what I'm having to do right now. I have a beautiful life. I'm very fortunate. I get to work from home. I get to set my own hours. And I'm finding that I'm having to invoke a deep sense of self-care in everything that I do right now. You know, there's times in life where we don't have to be as adamant about self-care as others. And I'm finding that right now, self-care is essential. It's as essential as breathing and drinking my water and taking my vitamins and showing up in the light. And showing up in the light is one of those things that is helping me stay balanced. And it is one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, because I want to help you stay balanced too. So if you are feeling deeply, if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling a deep sense of fatigue, not just physical fatigue, but life fatigue, then the angels are here for you. Tonight, we're going to bring to you waves of love to help you let go of the energies that are not yours, and to help bring to you nourishing, nurturing, soothing energy that will be very supportive in helping you to replenish. So take a deep breath in, and I'm going to invite the angels to be here, even though they're already here. And beautiful, precious angels on high, I invite you to join us here. I ask that you bring the energy of divine love and divine healing to everyone who hears this message. Please clear and lift our burdens in a way that is in alignment with our highest and best good. And please bring forward blessings of grace, of light, and of ease. Angels, I ask that you bring special blessings of love through time and space for everyone who is touched by this broadcast. So, dear ones, just take another deep breath in and out, and allow your body to let go and sink down and get comfortable. And the angels are starting to clear your energy field of anything you had picked up that is not yours to carry. And they are helping to bring you into a brighter energy field where it will be easier for you to sense and feel the divine love and support that is here for you. You are a beautiful, bright soul. You are a soul that brings forward so much light for others. And it is your turn now to replenish, to receive, and to allow the wellspring of support to come to you now. And if you have any prayers or intentions that you wish to place into the light right now, we invite you to do so. I believe with all my heart and soul the truth that whenever two or more are gathered in God's name, miracles happen. And right now, the prayers and intentions you bring forward in your heart, there are many of us assembled in the circle of light in the higher realms right now, amplifying your prayers. Your prayers are being received by the open heart of your angels. And so breathe and allow your prayers to rise up, knowing that you are a beloved of this universe. And your angels and the divine care deeply for you. And so just breathe and receive. You are a blessing. And God is bringing to you what you need. God is infusing you with light and inspiration. And you've heard probably the adage that God can dream a bigger dream for you than you can. So allow yourself to open to the beauty and the richness of God's dreams for you. And feel your soul rise up to meet this invitation. You are opening to a brighter expression of all that you are. You are moving through a time of transformation. You are receiving invitations of light that have been seeded in response to your prayers. You are co-creating. You are cultivating more brightness and more magic in your waking life. And for now, we invite you to rest. And while you rest, your angels will be taking good care of you. They will be watching over you. And they will be amplifying your prayers. So you cozy on in to this sweet, soft place of light, a sanctuary, if you will, that has been cultivated for you. And I'm going to read to you. So tonight, I'm going to read to you the second installment from Edith Nesbitt's book, The Amulet. So, in the first chapter, 4 siblings reconnected with a sand fairy that they had met the summer before. And the sand fairy is called a Psammead. And they are older than anything. They're as old as the world. And they have the ability to grant wishes, but they have asked the children not to ask for any more wishes. The children's parents are off on their own endeavors, and so the children are spending the holiday with old nurse. And this is where we pick up the story. Chapter 2, The Half Amulet. Long ago, that is to say last summer, the children, finding themselves embarrassed by some wish which the Psammead had granted them, and which the servants had not received in a proper spirit, had wished that the servants might not notice the gifts which the Psammead gave. And when they parted from the Psammead, their last wish had been that they should meet again. Therefore they had met it, and it was jolly lucky for the Psammead, as Robert pointed out. Now, of course, you see that the Psammead's being where it was the consequence of one of their wishes, and therefore was a Psammead wish, and as such could not be noticed by the servants. And it was soon plain that in the Psammead's opinion, old nurse was still a servant, although she had now a house of her own, for she never noticed the Psammead at all. And that was as well, for she would never have consented to allow the girls to keep an animal and a bath of sand under their bed. When breakfast had been cleared away, it was a very nice breakfast with hot rolls to it, a luxury quite out of the common way. And Thea went and dragged out the bath and woke the Psammead. It stretched and shook itself. "You must have bolted your breakfast most unwholesomely," it said. "You can't have been 5 minutes over it." "We've been nearly an hour," said Anthea. "Come, you know you promised." "Now look here," said the Psammead, sitting back on the sand and shooting out its long eyes suddenly. "We'd better begin, as we mean to go on. It won't do to have any misunderstanding. So I tell you plainly that—" "Oh, please," Anthea pleaded, "do wait till we get to the others. They'll think it most awfully sneakish of me to talk to you without them. Do come down, there's a dear." She knelt before the sand bath and held out her arms. The Psammead must have remembered how glad it had been to jump into those same little arms only the day before, for it gave a little grudging grunt and jumped once more. Anthea wrapped it in her pinafore and carried it downstairs. It was welcomed in a thrilling silence. At last Anthea said, "Now then." "What place is this?" asked the Psammead, shooting its eyes out and turning them slowly round. "It's a sitting room, of course," said Robert. "Then I don't like it," said the Psammead. "Never mind," said Anthea kindly. "We'll take you anywhere you like if you want us to. What was it you were going to say upstairs when I said the others wouldn't like it if I stayed talking to you without them?" It looked keenly at her and she blushed. "Don't be silly," it said sharply. "Of course it's quite natural that you should like your brothers and sisters to know exactly how good and unselfish you were." "I wish you wouldn't," said Jane. And Thea was quite right. What was it you were going to say when she stopped you? "I'll tell you," said the Psammead, "since you're so anxious to know. I was going to say this. You've saved my life, and I am not ungrateful, but it doesn't change your nature or mine. You're still very ignorant and rather silly, and I am worth 1,000 of you any day of the week." "Of course you are," Anthea was beginning, but it interrupted you. "It is very rude to interrupt," it said. "What I mean is, I'm not going to stand any nonsense, and if you think what you've done is to give you the right to pet me or make me demean myself by playing with you, you'll find out that what you think doesn't matter a single penny. See? It's what I think that matters." "I know," said Cyril. "It always was, if you remember." "Well," said the Psammead, "then it's settled. We're to be treated as we deserve. I with respect, and all of you with, well, I don't mean to wish to be offensive, Do you want me to tell you how I got into that horrible den you brought me out of? Oh, I'm not ungrateful. I haven't forgotten it, and I shan't forget it. Do tell us, said Anthea. I know you're awfully clever, but even with all your cleverness, I don't believe you can possibly know how. How respectfully do we respect you, don't we? The others all said yes and fidgeted in their chairs. Robert spoke the wishes of all when he said, I do wish you'd go on. So it sat up on the green-covered table and went on. When you'd gone away, it said, I went to sand for a bit and slept. I was so tired out with all your silly wishes, and I felt as though I hadn't really been to sand for a year. To sand, Jane repeated. Where I sleep. You go to bed, I go to sand. Jane yawned. The mention of bed made her feel sleepy. All right, said the Psammead in offended tones. I'm sure I don't want to tell you a long tale. A man caught me, and I bit him, and he put me in a bag with a dead hare and a dead rabbit, and he took me to his house and put me out of the bag into a basket with holes that I could see through, and I bit him again, and then he brought me to this city, which I am told is called the modern Babylon, though it's not a bit like the old Babylon, and he sold me to the man you brought me from, and then I bit them both. Now, what's your news? There's not quite so much biting in our story, said Cyril regretfully. In fact, there isn't any. Father's gone to Manchuria, and Mother and the lamb have gone to Madeira because Mother was ill. And don't I just wish that they were both safe home again? Merely from habit, the sand fairy began to blow itself out, but stopped short suddenly. I forgot, it said. I can't give you any more wishes. No. But look here, said Cyril. Couldn't we call an old nurse and get her to say she wishes they were safe home? I'm sure she does. No go, said the Psammead. It's just the same as you're wishing yourself. If you get someone else to wish it for you, it won't act. But it did yesterday with the man in the shop, said Robert. Ah, yes, said the creature. But you didn't ask him to wish, and you didn't know what would happen if he did. That can't be done again. It's played out. Then you can't help us at all, said Jane. Oh, I did think you could do something. I've been thinking about it ever since we saved your life yesterday. I thought you'd be certain to be able to fetch Father, even if you couldn't manage Mother. And Jane began to cry. Now don't, said the Psammead hastily. You know how it always upsets me if you cry. I can't feel safe a moment. Look here. You must have some new kind of charm. That's easier said than done. Not a bit of it, said the creature. There's one of the strongest charms in the world, not a stone's throw from where you brought me yesterday. The man that I bit, so, the first one, I mean, went into a shop to ask how much something cost. I think he said it was a concertina, and while he was telling the man in the shop how much too much he wanted for it, I saw the charm in a sort of tray with a lot of other things. If you can only buy that, you will be able to have your heart's desire. The children looked at each other and then at the Psammead. Then Cyril coughed awkwardly and took a sudden courage to say what everyone was thinking. I do hope you won't be waxy, he said, but it's like this. When you used to give us our wishes, they almost always got us into some row or another, and we used to think that you wouldn't have been pleased if they hadn't. Now, about this charm, we haven't got over and above too much tin, and if we blew it all on this charm, and it turns out not to be too much, well, you see what I'm driving at, don't you? I can see that you don't see more than the length of your nose, and that's not far, said the Psammead crossly. Look here, I had to give you the wishes, and of course they turned out badly, in a sort of way, because you hadn't the sense to wish for what was good for you. But this charm's quite different. I haven't got to do this for you. It's just my own generous kindness that makes me tell you about it, so it's bound to be all right. See?" "Don't be cross," said Anthea. "Please, please don't. You see, it's all we've got. We shan't have any more pocket money till Daddy comes home unless he sends us some in a letter. But we do trust you. And I say all of you," she went on, "don't you think it's worth spending all the money if there's even the chanciest chance of getting Father and Mother back safe now? Just think of it. Oh, do let's." "I don't care what you do with it," said the Psammead. "I'll go back to sand again till you've made up your minds." "No, don't," said everybody, and Jane added, "We are quite mind made up. Don't you see we are? Let's get our hats. Will you come with us?" "Of course," said the Psammead. "How else would you find the shop?" So everybody got its hat. The Psammead was put into a flat bass bag that had come from Farrington Market, with 2 pounds of filleted plaice in it. Now it contained about 3 pounds and a quarter of solid Psammead, and the children took it in turns to carry. "It's not half the weight of the lamb," Robert said, and the girls sighed. The Psammead poked a wary eye out of the top of the basket every now and then, and told the children which turnings to take. "How on earth do you know?" asked Robert. "I can't think of how you do it." And the Psammead said sharply, "No, I don't suppose you can." At last they came to the shop. It had all sorts and kinds of things in the window, concertinas and silk handkerchiefs, china vases and teacups, blue Japanese jars, pipes, swords, pistols, lace collars, silver spoons tied up in half-dozens, and wedding rings. There were officers' epaulets and doctors' lancets. There were tea caddies inlaid with red and brass curly-whirlies, plates of different kinds and money, and stacks of different kinds of plates. There was a beautiful picture of a little girl washing a dog, which Jane liked very much. And in the middle of the window there was a dirty silver tray full of mother-of-pearl card counters, old seals, paste buckles, snuff boxes, and all sorts of little dingy odds and ends. The Psammead put its head quite out of the fish basket to look in the window when Cyril said, "There's a tray there with rubbish in it." And then its long snail's eyes saw something that made them stretch out so much that they were as long and thin as new slate pencils. Its fur bristled thickly, and its voice was quite hoarse with excitement as it whispered, "That's it, there, under the blue and yellow buckle. You can see a bit sticking out. It's red. Do you see?" "Is it that thing, something like a horseshoe?" asked Cyril. "And red, like the common sealing wax you do up parcels with?" "Yes, that's it," said the Psammead. "Now you do just as you did before. Ask the price of other things. That blue buckle would do. Then the man will get the tray out of the window. I think you'd better be the one," it said to Anthea. "We'll wait out here." So the others flattened their noses against the shop window, and presently a large, dirty, short-fingered hand with a very big diamond ring came stretching through the green half-curtains at the back of the shop window and took away the tray. They could not see what was happening in the interview between Anthea and the diamond ring, and it seemed to them that she had some time, if she had the money, to buy everything in the shop before the moment came when she stood before them, her face wreathed in grins, as Cyril said later, and in her hand was the charm. It was made of a red, smooth, soft, shiny stone. "I've got it," Anthea whispered, just opening her hand to give the others a glimpse of it. "Do let's get home. We can't stand here like stuck pigs looking at it in the street." So home they went. The parlor in Fitzroy Street was a very flat background to magic happenings. Down in the country among the flowers and green fields, anything had seemed and indeed had been possible. But it was hard to believe that anything really wonderful could happen so near the Tottenham Court Road. But the Psammead was there, and it in itself was wonderful, and it could talk, and it had shown them where a charm could be brought that would make the owner of it perfectly happy. So the 4 children hurried home, taking very long steps with their chins stuck out and their mouths shut very tight indeed. They went so fast that the Psammead was quite shaken about it in its fish bag, but it did not say anything, perhaps for fear of attracting public notice. They got home at last, very hot indeed, and set the Psammead on the green tablecloth. "Now then," said Cyril. But the Psammead had to have a plate of sand fetched for it was quite faint. When it had refreshed itself a little bit, it said, "Now then, let me see the charm." And Anthea laid it on the green table cover. The Psammead shot out his long eyes to look at it. Then it turned them reproachfully on Anthea and said, "But there's only half of it here." This was indeed a blow. "It was all there was," said Anthea with timid firmness. She knew it was not her fault. "There should be another piece," said the Psammead, "and a sort of pin to fasten the 2 together." "Isn't half any good? Won't it work without it? It costs 7 and 6. Oh, bother, bother, bother." "Don't be silly little idiots," said everyone in the Psammead together. Then there was a wretched silence. Cyril broke it. "What shall we do?" "Go back to the shop and see if they haven't got the other half," said the Psammead. "I'll go to sand till you come back. Cheer up. Even the bit you've got is some good, but it'll be no end of a bother if you can't find the other." So Cyril went to the shop, and the Psammead to sand, and the other 3 went to dinner, which was now ready, and the old nurse was very cross that Cyril was not ready too. The 3 were watching at the windows when Cyril returned, and even before he was near enough for them to see his face, there was something about the slouch of his shoulders and the set of his knickerbockers and the way he dragged his boots along that showed but too plainly that his errand had been in vain. "Well," they said, hoping against hope on the front doorstep. "No go," Cyril answered. "The man said the thing was perfect. He said it was a Roman lady's locket and people shouldn't buy curios if they didn't know anything about something or another, and that he never went back on a bargain because it wasn't business, and he expected his customers to act the same. He was simply nasty, that's what he was, and I want my dinner." It was plain that Cyril was not pleased. The unlikeliness of anything really interesting happening in that parlor lay like a weight of lead on everyone's spirits. Cyril had his dinner, and just as he was swallowing the last mouthful of apple pudding, there was a scratch at the door. Anthea opened it, and in walked the Psammead. "Well," it said, when it had heard the news, "things might be worse. Only you won't be surprised if you have a few adventures before you get the other half. You want to get it, of course." "Rather," was the general reply, "and we don't mind adventures." "No," said the Psammead, "I seem to remember that about you. Well, sit down and listen with all your ears. 8 are there? Right. I am glad. You know arithmetic. Now pay attention, because I don't intend to tell you everything twice over." As the children settled themselves onto the floor, it was far more comfortable than the chairs, as well as more polite to the Psammead, who was stroking its whiskers on the hearthrug. A sudden cold pain caught at Anthea's heart. Father, mother, the darling lamb, all far away. Then a warm, comfortable feeling flowed through her. The Psammead was here, and at least half the charm, and there were to be adventures. If you don't know what a cold pain is, I'm glad for your sakes, and I hope you never may. "Now," said the Psammead cheerily, "you are not particularly nice nor particularly clever, and you're not at all good-looking. Still, you've saved my life. Oh, when I think of that man and his pail of water. so I'll tell you all that I know. At least, of course, I can't do that because I know far too much. But I'll tell you all I know about this red thing." Do, said everyone. "Well then," said the Psammead, "this thing is half of an amulet that can do all sorts of things. It can make the corn grow, and the waters flow, and the trees bear fruit, and the little new babies come. Not that babies are beautiful, of course," it broke off to say, "but their mothers think they are, and as long as you think a thing is true, it is true as far as you're concerned." Robert yawned, and the Psammead went on. "The complete amulet can keep off all the things that make people unhappy: jealousy, bad temper, pride, disagreeableness, greediness, selfishness, laziness. Don't you think it would be nice to have it?" "Very," said the children, quite without enthusiasm. "And it can give you strength and courage." "Well, that's better, Cyril." "And virtue." "I suppose it's nice to have that," said Jane, but not with much interest. "And it can give you your heart's desire." "Now you're talking," said Robert. "Of course I am," retorted the Psammead tartly, "so there's no need for you to." "Heart's desire is good enough for me," said Cyril. "Yes, but," Anthea ventured, "all that's what the whole charm can do. There's something that the half we've got can win off its own bat, isn't there?" she appealed to the Psammead. It nodded. "Yes," it said. "The half has the power to take you anywhere you'd like to look for the other half." This seemed like a brilliant prospect till Robert asked, "Does it know where to look?" The Psammead shook its head and answered, "I don't think that's likely." "Do you?" "No." Then Robert said, "We might as well look for a needle in a bottle of hay." "Yes, it is a bottle, not a bundle. Father said so." "Not at all," said the Psammead briskly. "You think you know everything, but you are quite mistaken. The first thing is to get the thing to talk." "Can it?" Jane questioned. Jane's question did not mean that she thought it couldn't, for in spite of the parlor furniture, the feeling of magic was growing deeper and thicker, and seemed to fill the room like a dream of a scented fog. "Of course it can. I suppose you can read?" "Oh, yes." Everyone was rather hurt at the question. "Well, then, all you've got to do is to read the name that's written on the part of the charm that you've got, and as soon as you say the name out loud, the thing will have power to do, well, several things." There was a silence. The red charm was passed from hand to hand. "There's no name on it," said Cyril at last. "Nonsense," said the Psammead. "What's that?" "Oh, that," said Cyril. "It's not reading. It looks like pictures of chickens and snakes and things." They were hieroglyphics. "I have no patience with you," said the Psammead. "If you can't read, you must find someone who can. A priest now?" "We don't know any priests," said Anthea. "We know a clergyman. He's called a priest in that prayer book, you know. But he only knows Greek and Latin and Hebrew, and this isn't any of those, I know." The Psammead stamped a furry foot angrily. "I wish I'd never seen you," it said. "You aren't any more good than so many stone images, not so much. If I am to tell the truth, is there no wise man in your Babylon who can pronounce the names of the great ones?" "There's a poor learned gentleman upstairs," said Anthea. "We might try him. He has lots of stone images in his room, and iron-looking ones too. We peeped in once when he was out. Old nurse says he doesn't eat enough to keep a canary alive. He spends it all on stones and things." "Try him," said the Psammead. "Only be careful. If he knows a greater name than this and uses it against you, your charm will be of no use. Bind him first with the chains of honor and upright dealing, and then ask his aid. Oh yes, you'd better all go. You can put me to sand as you go upstairs. I must have a few minutes' peace and quiet." So the 4 children hastily washed their hands and brushed their hair. This was Anthea's idea, and went up to knock on the door of the poor learned gentleman, and to bind him with the chains of honor and upright dealing. Chapter 3. The Past. The learned gentleman had let his dinner get quite cold. It lay on the plate and looked like a little brown island in the middle of a frozen pond. And consequently, it looked very nasty. And it was the first thing the children saw when, after knocking 3 times and receiving no reply, one of them ventured to turn the handle and softly to open the door. The table had images on it, queer-shaped stones and books, and there were glass canes fixed against the wall behind, with little strange things in them. The cases were rather like the ones you see in a jeweler's shop. The poor learned gentleman was sitting at a table in the window looking at something very small, which he held in a pair of fine pincers. He had a round spyglass sort of thing in one eye, which reminded the children of watchmakers, and also of the long snail's eyes of the Psammead. The gentleman was very long and thin, and his long thin boots stuck out under the other side of the table. He did not hear the door open, and the children stood hesitating. At last Robert gave the door a push, and they all started back, for in the middle of the wall that the door had hidden was a mummy case, very, very, very big, painted in red and yellow and green and black, and the face of it seemed to look at them quite angrily. You know what a mummy case is like, of course. If you don't, you had better go to the British Museum at once and find out. Anyway, it is not at all the sort of thing that you expect to meet in a top-floor front in Bloomsbury, looking as though it would like to know what business you had there. So everyone said, "Oh," rather loud, and their boots clattered as they stumbled back. The learned gentleman took the glass out of his eye and said, "I beg your pardon," in a very soft, quiet, pleasant voice, the voice of a gentleman who has been to Oxford. "It is us that beg yours," said Cyril politely. "We are sorry to disturb you." "Come in," said the gentleman, rising with the most distinguished courtesy, Anthea told herself. "I'm delighted to see you. Won't you sit down? No, not there. Allow me to move that papyrus." He cleared a chair and stood smiling and looking kindly through his large round spectacles. "He treats us like grown-ups," whispered Robert, "and he doesn't seem to know how many of us there are." "Hush," said Anthea. "It isn't manners to whisper. You say, Cyril, go ahead." "We're very sorry to disturb you," said Cyril politely. "But we did knock 3 times and you didn't say come in or run away now, or that you couldn't be bothered just now, or to come when you weren't so busy, or any of the things people do when you knock on doors. So we opened it. We knew you were in because we heard you sneeze while we were waiting." "Not at all," said the gentleman. "Do sit down." "He has found out there are 4 of us," said Robert, as the gentleman cleared 3 more chairs. He put the things off of them carefully on the floor. The first chair had things like bricks that tiny, tiny birds' feet have walked over when the bricks were soft, only the marks were in regular lines. The second chair had round things on it, like very large, fat, long, pale beads, and the last chair had a pile of dusty papers on it. The children sat down. "We know you are very, very learned," said Cyril, "and we've got a charm that we want you to read the name on it because it isn't in Latin or Greek or Hebrew or any of the languages we know. A thorough knowledge of even those languages is a very fair foundation on which to build an education," the gentleman said politely. "Oh," said Cyril, blushing, "but we only know them to look at, except Latin, and I'm the only one in Caesar with that." The gentleman took off his spectacles and laughed. His laugh sounded rusty, Cyril thought, as though it wasn't often used. "Of course," he said, "I'm sure I beg your pardon. I think I must have been in a dream. You are the children who live downstairs, are you not? Yes, I have seen you as I have passed in and out, and you have found something that you think to be an antiquity, and you've brought it to show me. That was very kind. I should like to inspect it." "I'm afraid we didn't think about your liking to inspect it," said the truthful Anthea. "It was just for us because we wanted to know the name on it." Oh, yes, and I say, Robert interjected, you won't think it's rude of us if we were to ask you first before we show it, to be bound in the, what do you call it in the bounds of honor and upright dealing, said Anthea. I'm afraid I don't quite follow you, said the gentleman with gentle nervousness. Well, it's this way, said Cyril. We've got a part of a charm, and something told us that it would work, though. It's only half a one, but it won't work unless we can say the name that's on it. But, of course, if you've got another name that can lick ours, our charm will be no go. So we want you to give us your word of honor as a gentleman, though I'm sure now I've seen you it's not necessary. But still, I've promised to ask you, so we must. Will you please give us your honorable word not to say any name stronger than the name on our charm? The gentleman had put on his spectacles again and was looking at Cyril through them. He now said, bless me, more than once, adding, who told you this? I can't tell you, said Cyril. I'm very sorry, but I can't. Some faint memory of a far-off childhood must have come to the learned gentleman just then, for he smiled. I see, he said. It is some sort of game that you are engaged in. Of course, yes. Well, I certainly promise. Yet I wonder how you learned of the names of the power. We can't tell you that either, said Cyril, and Anthea said, here's our charm, and held it out. With politeness, but without interest, the gentleman took it. But after the first glance, all his body suddenly stiffened as a pointer's does when he sees a partridge. Excuse me, he said in quite a changed voice, and carried the charm to the window. He looked at it. He turned it over. He fixed his spyglass in the eye and looked again. No one said anything. Only Robert made a shuffling noise with his feet till Anthea nudged him to shut up. At last the learned gentleman drew a long breath. Where did you find this? He asked. We didn't find it. We bought it at a shop. It's not far from Charing Cross, said Cyril. We gave 7 and 6 for it, added Jane. It's not for sale, I suppose. You do not wish to part with it? I ought to tell you that it is extremely valuable, extraordinarily valuable, I might say. Yes, said Cyril, we know that, so of course we want to keep it. Keep it carefully then, said the gentleman impressively, and if ever you should wish to part with it, may I ask you to give me the refusal of it? The refusal? I mean, do not sell it to anyone until you have given me the opportunity of buying it. All right, said Cyril, we won't, but we don't want to sell it. We want to make it do things. I suppose you can play at that as well as at anything else, said the gentleman, but I'm afraid the days of magic are over. They aren't really, said Anthea earnestly. You'd see they aren't if I could tell you about our last summer's holidays, only I mustn't. Thank you very much. And can you read the name? Yes, I can read it. Will you tell it to us? The name, said the gentleman, is Or-Hekau-Setcheh. Or-Hekau-Setcheh, repeated Cyril. Thanks awfully. I do hope we haven't taken up too much of your time. Not at all, said the gentleman. Let me entreat you to be very, very careful of that most valuable specimen. They said thank you in all sorts of different polite ways they couldn't think of, and filed out of the door and down the stairs. Anthea was last. Halfway down to the first landing, she turned and ran up again. The door was still open, and the learned gentleman and the mummy case were standing opposite to each other, and both looked as though they stood like that for years. The gentleman started when Anthea put her hand on his arm. I hope you won't be cross and say it's not my business, she said, but do look at your dinner. Don't you think you ought to eat it? Father forgets his dinner sometimes when he's writing, and Mother always says I ought to remind him if she's not home to do it herself, because it's so bad to miss your regular meals. So I thought perhaps you wouldn't mind by my reminding you, because you don't seem to have anyone else to do it for you. She glanced at the mummy case. It certainly did not look as though it would ever think of reminding people of their meals. The learned gentleman looked at her for a moment before he said, "Thank you, my dear. It was a kindly thought. No, I haven't had anyone to remind me about things like that." He sighed and looked at his dinner. "It looks very nasty," said Anthea. "Yes," he said, "it does. I'll eat it immediately before I forget." And he ate, and he sighed more than once. Perhaps because the dinner was nasty. Perhaps because he longed for the charm which the children did not want to sell. Perhaps because it was so long since anyone cared whether he ate his dinner or forgot. Anthea caught the others at the stair-foot. They woke the Psammead, and it taught them exactly how to use the word of power and to make the charm speak. I am not going to tell you how this is done because you might try to do it, and for you any such trying would almost be sure to end in disappointment, because in the first place, it is 1,000,000,000 to 1 against you ever getting a hold of the right sort of charm, and if you did, there would be hardly any chance at all of your finding a learned gentleman clever enough and kind enough to read the word for you. The children and the Psammead crouched in a circle on the floor in the girls' bedroom, because in the parlor they might have been interrupted by the old nurses coming in to lay the cloth for tea, and the charm was put in the middle of the circle. The sun shone splendidly outside the room. It was very light. Through the open window came the hum and rattle of London, and in the street below they could hear the voice of the milkman. When all was ready, the Psammead signed to Anthea to say the word, and she said it. Instantly, the whole light of the whole world seemed to go out. The room was dark. The world outside was dark, darker than the darkest night that ever was, and all the sounds went out too, so that there was a silence deeper than any silence you have ever dreamed of imagining. It was like being suddenly deaf and blind, only darker and quieter even than that. But before the children had gotten over the sudden shock of it enough to be frightened, a faint, beautiful light began to show in the middle of the circle, and at that very same moment, a faint, beautiful voice began to speak. The light was too small for one to see anything by, and the voice was too small for you to hear what it said. You could just see the light and just hear the voice. But the light grew stronger. It was greeny like glowworms' lamps, and it grew and grew till it was as though thousands and thousands of glowworms were signaling to their winged sweethearts from the middle of the circle. And the voice grew not so much in loudness as in sweetness, though it grew louder too, till it was so sweet that you wanted to cry with pleasure just at the sound of it. It was like nightingales and the sea and the fiddle and the voice of your mother when you have been a long time away and she meets you at the door when you get home. And the voice said, "Speak. What is it that you would hear?" I cannot tell you what language the voice used. I only know that everyone present understood it perfectly. If you come to think of it, there must be some language that everyone could understand if we only knew what it was. Nor can I tell you how the charm spoke, nor whether it was the charm that spoke or some presence in the charm. The children could not have told you either. Indeed, they could not look at the charm while it was speaking because the light was too bright. They looked instead at the green radiance on the faded carpet at the edge of the circle. They all felt very quiet and not inclined to ask questions or fidget with their feet, for this was not like the things that had happened in the country when the Psammead had given them their wishes. That had been funny somehow, and this was not. It was something like Arabian Nights magic and something like being in church. No one cared to speak. It was Cyril who said at last, "Please, we want to know where the other half of the charm is." "The part of the amulet which is lost," said the beautiful voice, "was broken and ground into the dust of the shrine that held it. It and the pin that join the two halves are themselves dust, and the dust is scattered over many lands and sunk in many seas. Oh, I say, murmured Robert, and a blank silence fell. Then it's all up, said Cyril at last. It's no use our looking for a thing that smashed into dust and the dust scattered all over the place. If you would find it, said the voice, you must seek where it still is, perfect as ever. I don't understand, said Cyril. In the past you may find it, said the voice. I wish we may find it, said Cyril. The Psammead whispered crossly. Don't you understand? The thing existed in the past. If you were in the past too, you could find it. It's very difficult to make you understand things. Time and space are only forms of thought. I see, said Cyril. No, you don't, said the Psammead, and it doesn't matter if you don't either. What I mean is that if you were only made the right way, you could see everything happening in the same place at the same time. Now do you see? I'm afraid I don't, said Anthea. I'm sorry I'm so stupid. Well, at any rate, you see this. That lost half of the amulet is in the past. Therefore, it's in the past we must look for it. I mustn't speak to the charm myself. Ask it things. Find out. Where can we find the other part of you? Asked Cyril obediently. In the past, said the voice. What part of the past? I may not tell you. If you will choose a time, I will take you to the place that then held it. You yourselves must find it. And with that, my beautiful friends, isn't that the start of a brilliant adventure? I look forward to reading you more of this book. But for now, it's time to drift off into your own magical dreams. I'm so grateful for our time together. The angels and I are sending you waves of love as you drift off into a beautiful experience of sleep. You are precious. You are a blessing in this world. And you are loved, and I am deeply grateful for you. Sweet dreams. We'll be together again soon.